Hi guys, just a chance to have a quick look at Assault on Vimy Ridge. I know these quick look videos are fairly useful, seem to be quite popular, so I thought I'd do a quick one on my latest book, latest game, Assault on Vimy Ridge. This is World War One. This one. It's maybe not your typical World War One game that might involve, quite sort of slow trench warfare, sides trying to grab a bit of ground here and there. This is different to that. It might be worth me just reading the introduction here, albeit fairly lengthy. It says the Battle of Vimy Ridge, so this is April 9th to April 12th, 1917, was part of the Battle of Arras in northeastern France and took place during World War One. It was the first time that the 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps fought together as one and is arguably Canada's most celebrated military victory. The ridge itself was a crucial strategic location, and previous attempts by the British and French to take it had failed. New tactics for assaulting trenches were employed, where enemy units were pinned and suppressed with machine gun fire and other weapons before infantry ran in with bayonets to finish the job. Soldiers were given more flexibility to make decisions on the fly, supported by non-commissioned officers as the battle developed, or in situations where officers had been lost to enemy fire. In addition, troops were allocated specific roles, for example as specialist grenade throwers. The German defence at Vimy Ridge were underprepared to allow their own to use their own new tactics for defending trench positions. In addition, the Canadian forces were advancing behind a sort of rolling barrage of artillery fire, which caused German soldiers to run for cover into underground chambers to avoid annihilation. And this helped the Canadians to enter the trenches before the enemy could recover and reinforce. The ridge was taken in a few days. So, yeah, this is really sort of a small unit, although there were tens of thousands of troops involved in the assault on Vimy Ridge. This game looks at a very small section of the ridge, takes a few rifle units, machine gun team, sergeant, working their way up the ridge as a separate little group of soldiers in a particular area of the ridge. So it covers each of the 4 divisions of the Canadian army that took part in Vimy Ridge, and there are 12 missions in total, split into 4 groups of 3 missions. So we've got these are called campaigns. We've got campaign A, which has 3 missions, and B has 3 missions, C and D have 3 missions each. And each one is dealing with a separate division of the army. So it goes 3rd, 2nd, 1st, 4th in that order, because the 4th had the toughest time. So I'll put that one last because that's the toughest one. So that's how the book works. As ever, nice and clearly set out. We've got plenty of colour on the pages, lots of graphics to look at, tables explaining here what sort of units are involved here. So we've got sergeant, rifle squads, MG teams, grenadiers and snipers, although some of those are only on certain, for example, only the Germans in this game have snipers. Nice, easy facing and line of sight rules in this game. So line of sight runs along the tile rows diagonally and across and up and down as well. Setup, again, really quick as ever with my games. A few minutes and you're done, if that, a couple of minutes. And we've got the rules set out here. Again, showing you the charts, which, as ever, appear on the pages themselves, but explaining each chart as we go through. What it does, the various orders that are available, what the units can do. And it's done this time in order of the phases and broken down so that you can get a real feel for how the game's going to flow, and also you can come back and find information easily when you're on a certain phase. You can just look back for that phase and find the relevant bit of it. So doing the Canadian phase, we've got the German orders phase, and the AI is pretty canny in this game. Nice and easy to operate, but it will, do all sorts of surprising things to challenge you along the way. So that deals with all that. Nice examples of play here, and again, more detail. And there's events as well in this game. So at the end of each turn, there are random events that can occur. So that they're there. This explains the campaign structure of the game and what happens between campaigns, so you have a chance to reinforce to some extent for any losses that you've taken before moving on to the sort of second mission of the campaign, and the third mission of the campaign is the final one of each campaign. So 3 missions. The missions are entirely playable as individual missions, of course, but it's quite nice to string them together and just there's no real admin to do between missions. Just got to make a note or remember which units have survived for the Canadians, and then you can start the next mission with those same units, having perhaps bolstered them a little bit in accordance with the chart here. So then we get the 12 missions, and I say you've got all the charts and rules on the left hand side. You see this is a reasonably complex game. You compare it to some other games that I've produced in the past. I mean, to some extent, I'm trying to put as much information as I can on this left-hand page, because I don't think it's really useful not to have to keep delving back to the rules, and you won't have to do that in this game. But if you compare it, for example, with the Fields of Normandy, my first game, just by the sheer amount of information on that left page, you can see that this is a more complex game. Still not complex by any stretch of the imagination. I think I've rated this one 2.5 out of 5, and I think on Board Game Geek it's holding up at the moment. I think about 2.33 people are rating it out of 5. So it's not complex, but there's more to it than some of those other games. So if you fancy a challenge. So then you've got the maps here, which generally you start at the bottom and you're trying to work your way up. The idea usually is to clear the enemy units from the map and move on, but the third mission of each campaign tends to have, not everyone, but tends to have a slightly different objective. So in this case, it's to hold these tiles on the left hand side here. So your units are moving up here. There's not a lot of cover around, the odd rock, tree, some craters and things, shell craters. The Germans, of course, will be entrenched in here with machine gun teams in bunkers and so on. So you get more of those as you move on to the harder campaigns later in the book. And it's very much the case of having to, as it said in the introduction, having to pin the German units with your machine guns and maybe grenadiers, and then getting your rifle units in there for some close combat kills. So this is almost like a charge, if you like, but you've got to do it at the right time and do it when you've suppressed the enemy sufficiently to do that. So you can see the maps vary. Obviously the design is pretty similar. The ridge is the ridge, and that's kind of what it was. Muddy. It was muddy. It was cold. There was the odd feature around, the odd small village building around and stuff that might help out and have to take, but generally, not a lot of eye candy around on Vimy Ridge, I'm afraid. It's not what it was about. This game does come with counters, and at first sight that probably can look a little daunting. What I would say is, for a start, half of this is the back of the other half, if that makes sense. So it's printed so that you can sort of mount one side on card, cut that out around the outside, and then mount the other side on the back, and then cut the counters out. They'll all be double-sided. There's a video on my channel which shows me doing that, because it's far easier than I've probably just made it sound there. So these can be double-sided, or you can just make them single-sided and just swap them as you need them. The red, the bright red side is generally the pinned side for all these units. But I'm including counters in my games now. Even I've been back and updated books like Fields of Normandy and put some basic counters in a lot of those games as well for you. And that's because people were asking for that as a feature. But that doesn't mean you have to use them. So if you're not a person that likes any kind of DIY in your games, and I fully appreciate that you don't want to necessarily faff around. Although I would say it only takes 20 minutes, half an hour to make the counters. But if you really don't want to do that, then these books are designed to play in various ways, as I was explained at the start. So you can still put a piece of acetate over this and use a pen and a dry erase and a a cloth or whatever you want to do to erase those things, or even photocopy it and use a pencil and eraser. You can still do that. There's not huge numbers of units on there at any one time. These are not, just because there are lots of units here, you're not going to get all of those on the map at the same time. Generally, you are going to need a sort of small handful of rifle units for the Canadians, maybe a machine gun team or two, perhaps grenadiers, and then a sergeant. So that would do. You've seen me use cubes before in my earlier games. I still do use them from time to time when I'm playing myself, because they're just easy. And again, for the Germans, you're going to need, you know, a handful of rifle squads. Well, you probably a few more than that, but you know, that's what I've got to hand at the minute, I think, for grey. Yeah, you need a few more than that, but I've got, you know, just you can get yourself a nice tub of cubes and stuff. That's great, you know, readily available on Amazon or whatever else, somewhere else. And you know, again, a machine gun squad or two, and maybe a sniper. There's only 3 types of unit on the German side. So one thing about this game is you do need to show the facing. So you'll probably notice the counters. Oh, there's one made there. Look, the counters do have a kind of arrow on them to help depict the facing, and you can face one of 8 ways. So yeah, it is important to do that. But again, it's dead easy on these, because if you want to face up the map, you just put them like that. And if you want to face the top corner, you put them like that. And if they're facing to the side, you put them there. So you know, it's dead easy. And these all start facing down, so they'll all start in the middle there. And if they, you know, if he faces down that way, I'll move to there, and he can move to there. Germans only ever have 1 unit in each square, and these squares are huge things, so you've got plenty of room. Can have the 3 Canadians in one, but even then you can still do the facing. You know, if they're all facing in the corner, then put them all like that. And if they're all facing forward, put them like that. And if 2 are facing forward and 1's in the corner, you just have to be a little bit more careful, but you can still get away with it, you know. It's perfectly doable, is what I'm saying. And you can, you know, think of your own ways. Or, of course, you just put a little arrow on your tokens or cubes or whatever you're using, and you know, you've then got a facing to point your way or their way. So, you know, nice and easy to play, lots of ways of playing, and great for travel, you know, planes, trains, automobiles, that kind of thing. Probably not when you're driving, though. That's the Assault on Vimy Ridge. Yeah, a bit more of a sort of specialist area, I guess, niche battle, but one worth finding out about. So, you know, do have a think about it. World War One, but to be honest, it plays like many World War II games, because the tactics were, as I read in the introduction, they're developing at that point in World War One. They were moving away from just, you know, everyone over the top and charge as fast as you can, to more kind of squad based on the ground tactics and so on. So worth having a look at. Quite interesting. That's Assault on Vimy Ridge. Cheers, guys.